Namaste. Good morning. We're getting down. This is 3 more to do after this, so we're getting down there. And again, I want to continue in this vein of just kind of sharing and just putting myself out there and not concentrating on formality at the same time, wanting to share significant occurrences. Recently, since the Trikaya, since the third Buddha incarnated, the Trikaya, the first Buddha is the lover, the second Buddha is the process of loving, and the third Buddha is the beloved. It's called Trikaya. It's a completeness, and it's actually different aspects of Buddha. But the third step, the beloved, is when the Lord Buddha personally asks you, Sakyamuni, Siddhartha, ask you if he can reside in your body, and that's the completion. It's not the end, it's just the completion of the Buddha elements. All the elements of the Buddha are now within. They were always there, but they had to be discovered step by step, but that's another story. And after this Trikaya that happened in June, after the beloved blessed me with his presence, the macrocosm and the microcosm have been just bombarding me. Micro, small, cosm, the smallest elements of our cosmos, and macro, the largest, and it's been going up and down. Look at the light, up and down, up and down. 1 minute I'm the smallest minutia. Planck? I don't know the smallest particle, but I know Planck is getting down there. Subatomic, and neutrinos that are bombarding us, and something like 3 million go through a space like this every second. Okay, anyway, this is not a talk about neutrinos, but just this in this onslaught, it reminds me of early days when the first awakening, when I went to the Library of Alexandria, and the bookshelf tall to the ceiling, way past the peripheral. The bookshelf approached, much like the Disney when the mop in the bucket kept multiplying. Well, these shelves would come rapid, more rapid, and they dropped the books right on me, right in front of me. And as it happened, I absorbed all the information. So what is known, has been known, can be known, and will be known. It's all, I knew it all, okay? And this franticness, it didn't last long. Well, I don't know how long it lasted, probably hours actually, but in the course of a 2.5-day meditation session, it wasn't overwhelming. I mean, it was of course overwhelming, but I mean, the length of the time, the intensity was overwhelming. And then I mellowed out and had the maturity of the Buddha and got rid of the last obstacle, the spiritual ego that comes upon awakening. It did for me when I'm in my infancy, my Buddha infancy, and thinking that I was special or extraordinary. And just takes a healthy dose of ordinariness to put extraordinary ordinariness is how I like to put it. It's so ordinary that it's extraordinary. Playing with words, love to do it. And so there was a learning process, and things came, there was plateaus, and then there was steep paths of learning, and then transitions, and lots going on. But that happened over a period, the first 8 years, and then probably 8 years ago was the lover, 6 years ago was when I began to be able to talk about the process of loving, the Dharma, the teachings. 6 years ago is when I started to feel confident enough to share, and it was 4 years ago, almost to the day. We're working on that day. Maybe I can wrap this up on the 18th of January. Wouldn't that be special since I started 4 years? Anyway, this 4 years has been when I've been willing to be out there. You know, it's not easy to put yourself out there. Even though this 4 years of YouTube hasn't exposed me to too many viewers. Not overwhelmingly exposed, but still putting yourself out there. It's like when you write something down and all of a sudden it becomes permanent. It starts from an idea and just writing it down, speaking it out, sharing. You're putting yourself on the line, okay? How come I got a bump there? I'm trying to smooth my cap. Anyway, sorry, cosmetics mean a lot. Just talking to Colleen a second ago, she said, appearance means a lot to me. Yes, it does. I work on this. And I have my own style. As you've probably, if you've watched any of me, you've probably ascertained that to be so. But anyway, 6 years, 8 years from the lover to the and then 2 years to become the process of loving, the Dharma teaching, and really significantly, publicly, the last only 4 years. But the 2 years before that, I was prepared. I'm just looking for a platform, and again, Colleen said, why don't you make a YouTube channel? Maybe you can monetize it, make a lot of money. Well, that wasn't my purpose, and I certainly succeeded in not accomplishing that as a purpose. Certainly hasn't monetized, but it's been a valued resource, and it's served me to chronicle my spiritual growth. It's my spiritual autobiography, and that will serve me if it doesn't serve anyone else. It'll be fun for me. I still go back and listen. And you know, the teachings from 4 years ago hold up as well as today's. Maybe the microphone is a little bit better sound. I don't know. But the first ones are just depending on my computer. Still have the photo booth, the camera, but I have a lavalier mic. That seemed to help. Anyway, from the Buddha number 2, sharing the process, sharing the Dharma, to Buddha number 3 was another 2 years. It just occurred this past July, I guess. I think right before my COVID shot, my shot number 1 of my Moderna, to be honest. I don't know if there's any, probably no correlation at all, but anyway. And since that time, it's been a mad rush. I talked about veils, and I understood just recently. I understood that veils are what produce, those layers and layers and layers and layers of veils are what prevent us from seeing our true selves. And they're lifted one by one, and they increasingly get finer. They're like a pretty thick in the beginning, and like gossamer was when I started realizing after the third Buddha, after the beloved entered my body, after the third part of the Trikaya, gossamer was the word that I used, and they were finer and finer veils, but more veils to unlift, and there's an endless supply of veils, and with each veil became new. It's a discovery. The knowledge is not new. The wisdom is not new, but my ability to see it in the context, to see it how I saw it, after a veil was lifted, clearer and clearer and clearer, but more inclusive and much faster. Wow. Sometimes I just felt like overwhelming, where I couldn't communicate. Luckily I anchored myself because I got a strong root chakra. I anchored myself and just prepared for the onslaught. But the universe provided for me, as it always does, and gave me a lot of opportunity to not have to inflict myself on too many others. And during this, because of microcosmic and macrocosmic, but the same flood of information that took me back to the Library of Alexandria, when I was being exposed to all knowledge, and was told that it was all accessible to me. I needed to know. I would know it when I needed to know it. But it was all there. Somehow I found the capacity to store that. The only thing that I found more overwhelming was consequent to this part of the awakening. In between the library was the past lives. I've mentioned before, tubing, floating down a river, calmly sipping some fruit juice, or maybe a cappuccino or espresso, because I'm not big on the juices, too much sugar. But anyway, just leisurely, and realizing that everything that I saw was a lifetime. And I wasn't invested, I wasn't involved, I didn't really care. And again, it was the ordinariness. I didn't see myself on some crown, and I was Christopher Columbus, or the miracle was that it was just so ordinary. A farmer, a hunter, accountant, I don't know. Just could see my lifetimes. And again, it was just like, very distant, not a personal involvement. But like a show, and it lasted a long time. And then I went right into the toughest one, probably, was the reconciliation of diametrically opposed phenomenon. I love that. It just means when the duality, you see through the illusion of duality. And to prepare, you have to, of course, lose fear, lose all your fears. And before you can lose your fears, you have to surrender. And of course, you have to surrender through the okayness of not only that your physical self will expire. Death is the biggest fear for most of us, after all. Death, we call it death, but it's just another form of life. Energy doesn't take away from energy. It just transforms into other sources of energy. So, surrender helped conquer the fears. And the fears were the last things. And that's when my mind started exploding. This is the same kind of feeling I had with the microcosmic and the macrocosmic inundation of mathematical concepts. Way beyond anything that I've ever experienced before. I mean, minuscule numbers and unbelievably large numbers, and the transposition between big and small and big and small. And but this being able to, what I used as free will and destiny. Okay, is it free will? Or is it destiny? Well, I would look at free will and say, yeah, yes. Or this is destiny, sorry. Destiny, 100% I believe in destiny. Yes, 100% I believe in free will. Wait a second. Diametrically opposed phenomenon. Destiny, free will. And my answer was 100% to yes. And I felt my head getting, whoa. Wait a second, how am I encompassing night and day, dark and light, tall and short, fat and thin, old and young, me and you, us and them? All these dualities, my ego, being separate and divided, all of a sudden I saw the unity. And that led to the cosmic laugh, and then that's when I really became aware of being infant Buddha on a dirty sidewalk in a gray, misty, dark, lonely environment. So that was the initial, that was becoming the lover, the first awakening of the first part of the Buddha, the Trioka, or Trikaya, the Trinity. Everything happens in threes, as the Japanese say. Indeed. But the other day, this is where it becomes now personal sharing. The other day, my brother and a great friend Rob and I were sitting around enjoying a cup of cappuccino, and me and Rob had cheesecake. My brother showed more restraint, but a cappuccino and the cheesecake at a nice little outdoor coffee shop, chatting about a camping trip that we're planning. And I'd made up my mind. I had a lot of ideas, and I spent a lot of time thinking about it, but I didn't want to be my normal self and be overwhelming with saying too much, so I did my best to bite my tongue. Asked Rob, but Rob was so open, he's so easy. So then I was able to suggest, and then we did some refinement, and we started maybe talking about too many details, or anyway, out of my mouth popped today's topic. Slow the flow. And Rob just perked up and he said, man, I want to make t-shirts. Slow the flow. I'll buy one of those, Slow the flow. Oh, it feels so good. And it was me talking out loud to myself that I need to take a break from how fast this was time. I had time to get over it and time to encompass it and accept it and say, okay, yeah, this is so. But how's it benefiting me right now? And what do I need most right now? And what I need most not right now is to slow down, slow the flow. And that's the topic of today's sharing. I'm entering in a phase of life that's going to be extremely different. In that, I'm very turtle. I have 7 haigui. Haigui is a sea turtle. I have 7 sea turtles tattooed on different parts of my body because I always envied the grace and the beauty of the turtle of the sea. And I share, my Chinese name is Hai Yang, which means gentle breeze that blows across the sea. But Hai is ocean. It's the ocean part of Hai Xin is ocean star. And Hai Gui is an ocean. Gui is turtle. Hai is ocean turtle. So the characteristics, I had to slow down, and I always get teased already that my wife would tease me that she has to look twice to even see if I'm moving. That physically I've already mastered this. I move slowly. Part of that is age, part of that is wisdom, part of that is design, part of that is meditation. But the accumulation of all these different practices. But mentally, it's like a freak show. I get from point A to point B, or point A to point Z without even pausing for all the other letters in between. Makes it hard to follow my conversation sometimes. I can be here and all the way over there and then be back here again. And because I don't have any beliefs anymore, I don't have any positions that I'm vested in supporting or arguing. After all, I just learned recently a little gift. Let the other person be wrong. In these days of political polarization, just let it go, as me and Buffalo say. But more importantly, just let the other person, I always need to be right. And now I had an epiphany. Let them be wrong. Who am I to point myself to correct their thinking? What a joke is that? Because thinking is just a monster. It's something that none of us have any control over whatsoever. We just get at different stages of being able to manage it, being able to dismiss it, ultimately, but being able to witness it, and certainly being able to understand that nothing of any constructive value and at least as a guide of what you should do in your life will ever come from the mind. It's a good tool. Find, sort, categorize, which is I call filing, and then filing, and then storing, and then accessing. What a treasure! That's I use that map. They use my brain. Anytime the brain gives me trouble, I hate to lose stuff. I go crazy about when I lost something. When something's misplaced, it drives me crazy. And I just put my mind on it. My mind's like a little dog. And I say, go boy, go fetch, boy. And man, the satisfaction comes into my... I got it. It pops up in a dream, or it pops up in a commercial, or it pops up in a daydream, or it pops up in the midst of a conversation, or someone else will say the words that I was waiting for. All kinds of ways that it comes to me. But we're given a fine mind, and we have to learn that it has its own use. Most importantly, we have to realize that absolutely no value towards guiding us in any manner whatsoever as how to do anything in our lives. Where does it come from? From the divinity, from the heart. My heart tells me what to do. And my heart is not correct, is not contributing to building ego. My heart is about unity. It's about compassion. It's about sharing. It's not about separation and division. It's not about building an ego. And more importantly, the spiritual ego came completely from my mind. And it's funny that the end of the spiritual ego came from the heart, and I suspect that when I mourn the death, that's the darkness that some talk about in awakening, is that you mourn it just like a physical death, just like something. Well, what's nearer and dearer to you, for better or worse, than your self-constructed, environmentally fed, supported by family and friends, image of what you think you are? I mean, what could be closer? Until you realize that it couldn't be farther. It can't be far enough. So it seems to me, since it's about being, it's about awakening, it's the gerund form, the ing, it's a continual action. Then I'll come back to these more frantic times when another veil lifts and I'm dealing with something else again. Lately, as I said, mathematics and astronomy and quantum physics, as well as anatomy, as well as microscopic, the microcosm, the smallest, and understanding that continuum, that spiral, that apparent dualism, macro is macrocosmic and microcosmic are the same. And you learn it's not easy. Maybe for Albert Einstein or Stephen Hawking or somebody like that had this kind of mathematical background and training. And mathematics, after all, is a language. And it's a language I'm not familiar with at all. But all of a sudden, I'm immersed in this language. And I wish I could tell you that I had some firm grasp on what's going on. I see it, I feel it, I experience it, but you're not going to catch me. I'm not ready to teach a cosmology class. I'm not ready to lecture on the micro-universe or the macro-universe. Macro might be easier because I'm always thinking big. I'm more equipped to think big, and I think that's why this going to the small has been so important. But the liberating thing is that when you get small enough, all of a sudden you morphed into the largeness. And it's the opposite. It's the larger you go, pretty soon it starts falling down to the macro to micro, macro to micro to macro to micro. And it comes so fast, it's like as quickly as you can breathe. I mentioned becoming aware of every cell, molecule, atom, subatomic particle confined in my physical form, to understand that there's 18 billion chemical reactions in the brain and body. 80% is in the upper spine and the brain. 18 billion. These are neurons firing. These are chemical reactions within the body. I just went big again. But as I'm wrapping this up, I'm sitting with you and sharing with you that I've picked sage green. Sage green is kind of a grayish green. It runs the gamut to a forest green and a gray green. And somewhere, this is the color that I choose to represent my group, if it does indeed ever turn out to be large enough to be called a group. It's this kind of sage green. And I've already got quite a nice logo for my Yang Zendo that I like, that incorporates the yin and the yang, the epitome of Chinese philosophical accomplishment. Yin and yang, the Bagua as they call it, the black with the white dot, interlapping the black yang with the white, black yin with the black yang dot, the feminine, and then the masculine white yang with the yin dot. So the back of the t-shirt, the circle about this big is going to be somewhere between the shoulder blades, Yang Zendo. And then on the front of the shirt is going to be slow the flow. And I can kind of visualize. I have Samuel working on it, my favorite decorator, my favorite graphic artist, and I can kind of see slow the flow. I can kind of see the words drooping, like Droopy, the Mountie. So you guys remember Droopy, the character, the Basset Hound, or was he a beagle? Basset Hound, maybe. Look, yeah, Droopy, sagging. The words, slow the flow. So I'll be living this, practicing it, and I need to manifest a physical reminder. First of all, I want to do it for Rob, First and foremost, he said he'd wear the t-shirt. I don't know if I sneaked the Hi Young Zendo on the back, but if I keep it small enough, he might be okay with that. But he can see the slow the flow. He can see that. So sometimes I know when it's time to manifest, and this is one of the things that I think is worth manifesting. I use Sages for Ages for the name of my little group that I work with, my little group of 8 to 10. Sages for Ages, and my original idea was sure, but then slow the flow. Oh. And I want it in front because I want to be able to read it. I'm the one that needs this reminder, because the time I will enter a period again, unavoidable, when it's going to be fast and furious, as they say. So I'd like to put it as succinct as that Zen dude once said. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Now this is what I want to dedicate. This is the best koan that I'm going to repeat it again because I love it, and it'll just fit into the remaining seconds that I have. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Now, thanks to that succinct Zen dude of the past that put this together. So those definitely words to live for. On the outside, all remains the same. On the inside is where your playground, your workshop, your job, your duties, your efforts are all directed to the inside. This is where yourself resides. This is where awakening, this is where you awaken from the dream. This is where you remember the forgotten. This is where it's at, as they say.